You're tuning into Ready, Set, Reset, where our goal is to help listeners reset their outlook by providing a closer look into behavioral and mental health in our youth. We visit with a range of professionals across the field to get their input and insight on what's really going on. Our first series kicks off with the Student Mental Health Chronicles, which features school counselors from across Texas, from public to private. This podcast is for educational and motivational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional training or personal therapy. Hello and welcome to the Ready, Set, Reset podcast. I'm your host, Sierra O'Neill, licensed professional counselor and founder of Reset IOP. With me is my co-host, Mrs. Penny Haight, licensed professional counselor, supervisor, and owner of Counseling by Penny and Associates.
Hi, I'm Penny. I'm a former school counselor. You are tuning in to an episode of our inspiring podcast that spotlights school counselors and their incredible work they do day in and day out with students. The content you will hear on this podcast today is focused on the struggles in schools related to the mental health of youth, providing a weekly insight, resources, and solutions to address the growing and ongoing issue that will support other school counselors, parents, teachers, and the students.
All right, so our guest today is school counselor Ms. Cherish Mitchell, with us here from Judson ISD. Welcome, Ms. Mitchell. How are you feeling today?
Thank you. Feeling excited to be here. Looking forward to all the new opportunities to meet people and connect with like-minded individuals, so It's very exciting. Yes, feel good.
Okay, awesome. Definitely good to, have a day going with that excitement kind of build up in you and just ready for growth and learning.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. So before we jump into things, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your experience as a school counselor?
Wow, so, I started, being that from Texas, I started as a teacher and just started thinking of how could I better help my students, because a lot of them, they come and they give you those, those personal stories, and you're like, wow, how can I better help my kiddos? Because you have those conversations and you're like, I can't have this conversation with you in my capacity, So I started having to think outside of that, like, okay, well, what else could I get into to really help them? And school counseling was what came to me, and so I became a school counselor. I've been a counselor for 9 years. Okay. I also got my LPC, so I do a little private practice too, but being the school counselor, it's been an amazing experience, just being able to have the time with the students one-on-one and not being so worried about the content that I'm trying to teach at the same time. So it's been nice just having that one-on-one time when I need to.
Awesome. Okay. And I know you said it got to a point in the classroom where, you needed to go, beyond the classroom measures. What year of teaching do you feel like that was for you? And I guess what grades were you working with at that time?
So I was at the middle school level, and I'm at middle school now. I did do a couple of years, like 4 years in high school, but I would say in my 5th year in the classroom, that was when I started feeling like, okay, this is becoming a regular thing. It wasn't just a fluke. I am seeing that I'm having these connections with students. So, around year 5 was when I was starting to look at moving out into the counseling field.
I think I had a very similar experience, same amount of time. And I think that also during that time, the mental health issues were becoming more pervasive for our youth. And understanding how it was affecting the academic, because that was our job as teachers, is to get the academic outcome. But you gotta deal with the mental health and capture the kid's heart before you can do the academic piece. So very similar experience.
That's right. Yeah, just looking at the whole child, like it's not just about can they multiply or can they write this essay, but are you in the right space to write this essay? And it wasn't until I went to school for counseling where I thought about like, it makes a difference if they're actually mentally prepared to do what I'm asking them to do in the classroom. Yes. And I didn't think of that before. I kind of thought of it like, okay, why are you not understanding this? Like, how do I need to break it down for you? But it was also just that check-in of, are you okay?
Yeah.
Like, are you okay today? Are you in the space to do what I'm asking? So
Yeah.
it did make me think about that more my last year of teaching. So that was good.
Yeah. Because again, like you said, it's that check-in of, even as simple as, did you sleep well last night? Maybe there was an argument with your mom or a disagreement before you went to bed, and so woke up, having a rough day and then brought that into school. But then the teacher has these expectations for you to be on point today, not knowing, hey, there's something else, that's interfering with this today.
Right.
So,
that's right.
So, okay, well, let's go ahead and, jump into some questions further here, Mrs. Mitchell. So, what are some common mental health challenges you've observed in students, and how do you address them?
So I've noticed that, especially since COVID has happened, I do see a lot more of the depression and anxiety in our students. Um, I am seeing them kind of turn to self-harm a lot more than what they were before. I think it was there before,
Yeah.
but I think since COVID especially, like, it's definitely increased. They're getting more clever in where they hide it. And then also I'm seeing some more substance use at a younger level. I think before the substance use was more like high school, ninth graders, but my middle schoolers are definitely kind of struggling with the vapes and the substance use.
That's scary that it starts so soon.
Absolutely.
Can you share some of your wins with us, like with all these issues that are on your campus? What are some of the things that have worked, like some success stories? Because I think it's really important, especially for new counselors, to hear, like, I need to hear the success stories and what they did.
Yeah. We really try to focus a lot on, and this is one of the things I'm going to always say, I think we hear it a lot, building the relationship, and for helping the teachers realize how important that is for them to do it, because they get to see them every day, and I tell the teachers, like, you get to see them every day, so you know exactly when they're in a good mood, a bad mood. So you're going to be the first person that's going to help raise awareness to when a student is having a crisis or just not themselves, where they need to check in with the counselor, And so having the relationships with certain students, I even have a little journal that we write back and forth in, because they're not the best at expressing their feelings verbally, so it's easier for them to write. I have some who just have a journal in my office, and they just know, like, okay, I need my 5 minutes, and they'll come and get their journal, and they just sit down and write with my sound machine. And so that has been nice. That has been really nice, just to see that I am making a difference for some. It hurts when you can't get all of them, but when you have a great team and you're able to all be on the same page, like, you are able to reach more than a few. So
that's a great tip.
Nice.
I think that's solid, something that is pretty easy to implement. Are there any more that you could share? Because I think that's a great strategy.
I have also been, and this is something that we are in the works of starting, but I want to really talk to my kids about CBT. Just getting them to understand exactly how everything is connected and how they can take control over their own destiny in some ways, and they don't have to be where they came from. So definitely maybe doing like a Teams or a Zoom where you can project it on the screen. The teacher could just log in, and you could do a quick little, hey, let me teach you something about CBT. Let me show you this technique or this strategy. And because we're just one person, but you can still reach them all at one time if they log into the screen.
Yeah, it's amazing when you share like thought distortions and ways to reframe it. Kids seem to be really good at that.
Yeah.
One of the things I used to do is take a frame, and then we'd take the pictures, and I say, here's the, we take like a 5x7 piece of paper. Here's the negative thoughts. And then we'd put the next paper in there where they reframe the thoughts. And they love doing that. And I had these little, they were, something you could buy on, I can't remember that. Anyway, you buy them and they're cheap and they're little frames.
Okay.
But yeah, we'd say the negative and then the positive, reframe.
And that's very, very powerful because they do have poor self-esteem, poor babies. Their self-esteem is low. And so, yes, that is very helpful. And then also, I'm trying to think of, there was one other I wanted to say. Help going through and helping them create their safe place or their happy place.
Yeah.
And it's funny how you'll see them really close their eyes, like they're really trying to find it. They want to find it. So just walking them through, okay, let's just create this space for you, because sometimes you're stressed at school, sometimes you just need to know that your place is in reach, regardless of where you are physically. Your happy place is in reach. So that was nice to do.
Yeah, I love that. I think kids really get into that, and even drawing their safe space.
Yes.
They love that.
So one other question, just kind of in regards to the challenge when you mentioned the self-harm, is how common is it for you to find students that are self-harming while they're at school on campus, or is it more so just finding out that they're doing it outside of school?
Well, that's the crazy thing, because even this year, I've seen it more where it's happening on campus.
Okay.
And I love my students. Some of them, because of the relationship I have with them, they'll come to me and say, hey, miss, this student is doing X, Y, and Z, or I saw this student.
Okay.
And I'm like, thank you so much for telling me this. Thank you for... So I want to make sure that I let them know that they did the right thing by telling me. And then, of course, I immediately go get that student. So I am seeing it more like it's happening during the school day. The stress is just overwhelming for them.
Yeah.
And so we do address that. I have different little techniques, like I'll tell them, hey, use a red marker instead, and write down the names of the people who would be affected by this if they were to find out that you were doing this, or if you were hurting yourself.
Okay.
So they can see the red still, and they can feel like they're writing something. Because I know some people say try the rubber band, but that can also still be hurtful.
Yeah.
So I was going to like maybe a red marker, because that's something more accessible.
Yeah.
Holding ice is not as accessible.
Right.
Unless they go to the school nurse or something like that.
Yeah.
So.
I had a student once, and that they were self-harming, and we talked about like, what's the opposite of this? What would the opposite feeling? And she said to feel free, to feel. I said, well, what would be a symbol of that? So she drew a butterfly in the place where she wanted to hurt. And then there's another piece of that, is that there is some, she would do it with a pen, and we would talk about like the pressure has to be appropriate, that kind of thing.
Correct, yes. And that's why I used the marker, just because it doesn't take too much pressure to see it on there.
To go through. Okay,
yes.
okay. So next, let's look at, maybe the biggest struggles that you have with the teachers or the other staff members that interact with the students. Because, even as you talk about, the alternatives you offer to the kids, like writing on their arms. I remember when I was in school, people used to get in trouble for writing on themselves. But as a counselor, I reflect and see how that can be that good alternative to self-harming. So what's your response like, or, the struggle you have with the teachers and staff members?
A lot of times our teachers forget when they were in high school or when they were in middle school.
Yeah.
And they do tend to talk at our students instead of speaking with them. So it's just that having to constantly remind them, like, hey, pull the child aside. You don't have to accost them. Pull them aside and have that conversation. You'll get a better reaction, because a lot of our students will get immediately defensive, and then that situation goes from way left from what it needed to, just because of your initial approach. So that's something that with the teachers we try to remind them, like, please, just think about, they may not have had a great morning. They may have had some other struggles that have nothing to do with you. So
yeah, if you apply what Dr. John Gottman talks about, a harsh startup, right? And teaching the teachers a gentle startup, and how, like, if we start out, however we start out at the conversation, if it's harsh or whatever tone it's in, it's probably how it's going to end.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, and again, I know that can be difficult, of course, trying to get that message across to them sometimes, but like you said, it's simply as reflecting back to when we were in school and how our interactions with teachers went, and just being able to start from the top up with those teachers. So do you guys at your school or in your district, y'all ever do anything, like any education at the beginning of the year for the staff members, like a mental health talk or just kind of a FYI to put out before the school year gets started?
We do. Every year we do have sessions with the students. The teachers, they're broken down into groups, and they'll rotate into our session. We have our own little counseling session.
Awesome.
And we'll cover an array of things with them, which is probably overwhelming for them. It's not a lot to us, but that's because we do it every day, right? But we do talk to them, and then as of late, we've been going into their planning meetings and just kind of reinforcing and following up with them, like, hey, are there any concerns? What do you have going on? And try to give them some tips on how to work with specific students that we may have regularly in our office.
I love that you're going into the planning time, because our teachers are struggling too with their mental health and not having enough support for the behaviors that they're dealing with from the kids in the classroom. And so for you to go in and give the support and tips and coping strategies, and that's amazing. That's great.
Yeah, it's been good. And I'm sorry that we didn't start it until COVID year, but I'm glad that we're doing it now.
Yeah.
Especially COVID year. We were checking in with teachers regularly, daily almost, just how are you doing? And it was really about the teacher at that point, because we didn't have students on campus. So we were really able to really feed into our teachers, and so now we're just still trying to follow up with them, check in with them, but then also get some feedback from them on what they're seeing in the classroom.
For sure. Okay. What are some of the key indicators or warning signs that school counselors should be more aware of when it comes to students and mental health?
I would say one of the biggest things is that a lot of the students are not going to come to you and tell you, this is what's going on with me, so it's really about just, you have to be in the hallways, you have to be in the cafeteria, you have to be in those places where the kids are to watch their behavior, to watch how they're different from day to day, because you're going to be looking for what are they not saying, or how are they different today from yesterday. I noticed that you're not sitting with the same friends. Those are big deals to them, because it's all about social at that age. So it's important for us to see, okay, I see you're not sitting with your friends anymore. What's going on? If you're in your office, you're not going to see that.
Right. I think another part to that is definitely being out and so that they can see you and interact and notice how what changes are occurring, but also to have a great relationship with your nurse. Kids that are coming in and they have a stomach ache, or there's somatic issues going on, right, to anxiety, depression, and then also knowing the teachers, and it sounds like you're touching base with them too.
Yes.
Even Ms. Mitchell, I think for me, when I've worked with a lot of teachers, just kind of in general, one of the big misses that I've seen is that they overlook the drop in grades. So you have a kid that has been successful in class and they're doing well, and then all of a sudden the grades drop. They don't look into it further of yes, the why, but understanding that something has had to happen there. Not that they're just not studying, but maybe a traumatic event. Parents are going through a separation that they don't realize, and it's just that they're on the student, you need to pull your grades up, you need to do this, just everything they need to do, instead of trying to understand, what's behind this right now. And, I think if teachers look into that a little bit more to, try to understand, because there's so much that's missed there. Do you, find that being a common thing within your school, or that teachers overlook when grades do drop, or maybe even attendance, from a kid that's used to excelling, and then all of a sudden that changes and we just take it as, they're being lazy, or they just are in with the wrong group?
That is very true. We do have some teachers that they just kind of think, okay, you stopped doing your work because you stopped caring, okay? But then we do have some who are just like, hey, what's going on here? But then also, again, I have an awesome group of counselors that I work with, and we look at their grades. And
Stay in the loop.
And especially semester, I'll call them in and like, hey, how did you go from an 80 to a 52? Like, what happened? Mm-hmm. So we do look at those things, and then we'll follow up with the teacher. So if the teacher did miss it, mm-hmm. now we're bringing it back to your attention. Like, hey, have you talked to this kid's parent? Like, what's going on? And, just trying to get in and figure out as much as we can about the situation or what's happening with that student in particular.
Yeah, for sure. Just diving a little bit deeper sometimes. It just takes a little bit.
Just ask the question,
yeah.
right?
And the kid will answer. Well, you know what? My parents are actually going through divorce right now, and I'm between households. So, I can't keep up with my books, or I'm not sleeping at night, and it's just so many components that as the school, you can't do a whole bunch, but if you can understand and, give them that in that respect of knowing what space they're in, like you said earlier, to be able to, work with them further. So, well, Ms. Mitchell, it was a pleasure to sit down with you. I feel like we've had a pleasant conversation today, and I really appreciate you taking out the time to, be our guest and give us additional insight about what you deal with day in and day out as a school counselor in Judson ISD, with the middle schoolers at that.
Yes.
But
love them.
Before we close, if you had one thing to leave with our listeners, what would that be?
Other than the typical line of build relationships, right? Other than building those relationships, just keep learning. Keep learning, keep reading, keep finding out more information, and ask questions. Ask your students questions. Talk to them. I think that would be the biggest thing.
Hey, it goes a long way for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that is all for us today. Thanks for tuning in and taking time out of your day to listen in on mental health. And remember, sometimes all it takes is resetting your outlook. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Ready, Set, Reset 1. Follow us on Instagram at ready_set_reset1 for mental health tips, laughs, and motivation. And if you know a student or have a child in the Fort Worth area that could use some additional support, visit our website at sunflowersigma.com to see if Reset IOP is right for them. You will find the resources discussed in today's podcast in the description area.